Karoline Leavitt thought she landed a knockout blow on national TV, but Jasmine Crockett didn't fight back with words. She responded with something far more powerful, and it left Karoline scrambling. "You don't actually believe that's a real solution, do you?" Karoline Leavitt said, her eyes locking onto Jasmine Crockett across the glossy table, her voice laced with just enough sarcasm to earn a few chuckles from the studio audience. The moderator shifted in her seat, ready to move on. But Karoline wasn't finished. "Because if that's the best you've got, Congresswoman, I'm not sure what exactly you're bringing to Washington." For a second, the room held its breath. Cameras zoomed in. Producers in the control booth silently prayed for a reaction. Political Twitter lit up. And Jasmine? She blinked once, sat back, then smiled. Not a forced one. Not that tight grin politicians give when they're cornered. It was genuine, slow, steady, and just shy of amusing. "I bring receipts," Jasmine said quietly, "but go on." Karoline tried to keep the momentum, tossing out half-baked statistics and buzzwords, most of them aimed at painting Jasmine as out of touch, unprepared, performative. But Jasmine didn't take the bait. She let Karoline talk. It wasn't cowardice. It was a calculation. Jasmine had learned early in life that when someone's trying to embarrass you in public, the worst thing you can do is give them the spectacle they want. Instead, you keep your cool, you listen, and when the time comes, you speak so clearly it makes the noise around you feel foolish. The round table went viral, mostly because of Karoline's confidence. She'd walked off stage with the air of someone who thought she'd won something. She tweeted a clip before her team even got back to the green room. When you show up prepared and they've only got catchphrases. Jasmine said nothing. She returned to her dressing room, unplugged the mic from her blazer and sat on the arm of the couch. Her aide, Liana, hovered near the door, arms crossed. "She really thinks she got you," Liana said, clearly annoyed. "She did what she needed to do," Jasmine replied. "But that doesn't mean I didn't." Liana raised a brow. "You didn't say much." "I don't have to." A beat passed. Then Jasmine added, "We're not playing the same game." Later that evening, as Jasmine boarded her flight to Providence, Rhode Island, for a local listening session she'd promised to attend weeks earlier, the headlines were already split. Some praised Karoline's fire, others called it showboating. But even those sympathetic to Karoline admitted Jasmine's calm unnerved them. "She didn't even blink," one commentator noted. "It's like she knew something the rest of us didn't." She did. On the plane, Jasmine opened her laptop. She wasn't drafting a rebuttal. She was finalizing a proposal. One that had been quietly in the works for months. A bill built on real numbers, actual stories, and meetings she'd taken far from camera crews. It wasn't polished yet, but it was close. What Karoline had brought up on that stage, meant to be a trap, was the very issue Jasmine had spent half her first term researching. She didn't need to fight back. All she had to do was finish what she'd already started. Jasmine clicked through the document. She highlighted a few lines, reworded others, datasets, footnotes, testimonies from real families, even a funding breakdown. Everything backed up. Everything is verified. As the plane started its descent, Liana leaned over. "What are you doing?" Jasmine glanced at her, finishing the conversation she thought she won. But while Karoline slept soundly that night, replaying her performance, Jasmine was about to shift the spotlight in a way no one expected. The hotel room in downtown Providence wasn't extravagant. Jasmine had stayed there before, clean, quiet, with that familiar beige carpeting and 2 firm pillows. She didn't need luxury. What she needed was a place to think. She slipped off her heels, walked to the desk, and opened her laptop again. Outside, the city was winding down, but in her mind, everything was speeding up. The conversation from earlier replayed in fragments. Karoline's tone, the smugness, the sideways looks from the moderator. Jasmine hadn't forgotten any of it. Not because it stung, but because it revealed something far more useful. Karoline had no plan, just posturing. Jasmine's fingers moved steadily across the keyboard. She wasn't writing to win points. She was building an argument no camera could interrupt. A legislative proposal that would hit harder than a viral clip. Liana walked in with takeout, a half-eaten salad, and a lemonade. "You haven't touched anything since we got here," she said, dropping the bag onto the table. "I'm pretty sure your last meal was yesterday." Jasmine barely looked up, not hungry. "People think you lost tonight," Liana said after a moment. "You know that, right?" Jasmine finally stopped typing. "Let them. They're running with clips like it's a slam dunk." She leaned back in the chair. A good soundbite dies in a day. Policy lives longer. The TV played softly in the background, some pundit panels. The usual echo chamber. Karoline's face flashed across the screen, confident and smug, parroting the same line she'd already tweeted. "It's easy to talk big when you have no real record." Jasmine muted it with the remote. "I have a record," she said, more to herself than to Liana. "They just haven't read it yet." On her screen sat the final draft of her proposal. It wasn't pretty. It was gritty, detailed, and impossible to dismiss. It tackled housing instability, not with theories, but with budgets, timelines, and structural reform. It called out federal delays, state loopholes, and real-world consequences. And it named the very bill Karoline had once voted against in her advisory role before pivoting publicly. Jasmine had copies of that too. She wasn't trying to embarrass Karoline. That was the difference. She wasn't interested in tearing someone down just to climb higher. This was about work. The people behind the statistics, the families who showed up to community halls on weeknights with thick folders and stories no one ever broadcast. She remembered a man named Alonzo in Hartford, a former Marine, 3 kids evicted because the VA had stalled his paperwork for 6 months, or Julia in Fort Wayne, a full-time nurse sharing one room with her mother and 2 daughters, all because their housing voucher was caught in some technical glitch no one bothered to fix. Karoline had made it sound simple. People just need to work harder. Jasmine knew better. She had met the hard workers. She had seen the receipts. She closed the laptop. "It's ready," she said quietly. Liana turned to her. "You want to wait? Let the noise die down." "No, I want them to see what it looks like when you do the real work, first thing in the morning. No fanfare." The room went still. There was something about Jasmine in that moment. Calm, but sharp. Like a blade kept sheathed until the right time. She didn't posture. She didn't rehearse zingers. She moved with intention. At 5:43 a.m., she emailed the final proposal to her legislative director in D.C. At 6 o'clock, her comms team received a draft statement. No press conference, no podium, just a press release, the proposal, and a PDF titled, "The Work They Refused." To do by 6:30, it was out. But while the world was still waking up, Jasmine had already changed the conversation. And Karoline didn't even know it yet. By 7:15 a.m., the email had reached inboxes from Capitol Hill to Sacramento. Most skipped it at first. Staffers and reporters buried under newsletters and daily briefings. But by 7:42, someone at the Philadelphia Inquirer opened it. 10 minutes later, an assistant editor at the Dallas Morning News did the same. And just after 8 o'clock, a researcher at Face the Nation forwarded it to his boss with a single line. "You'll want to read this." What followed wasn't dramatic. There were no red banners, no breaking news music, just a quiet avalanche of attention. One forwarded email at a time. Jasmine's proposal didn't scream. It didn't have to. It walked people through real stories, real flaws in the housing assistance system, and how to fix them. It pointed out patterns, contradictions, and without naming names, it made Karoline's roundtable comments look painfully shallow. Reporters started calling. Not just Jasmine's team, but others too. Policy analysts, housing advocates, even a few conservative think tanks. They weren't angry. They were curious. By 9:12 a.m., the hashtags had flipped. What had been had Karoline crushed. It the night before turned into a hashtag Crockett plan and hash real receipts. Karoline's comms director, a man named Seth, read the summary out loud in their Capitol Hill office. She had this in the works. Since when? No idea, Karoline said, scrolling through her phone. But it looks like people think it's brilliant. Seth looked up. It is brilliant. And it calls you out. Not directly, but enough that folks are connecting the dots. Karoline sat back, lips tight. This was staged. No, this was strategy. By noon, Politico had published a piece titled, "Crockett's Proposal Puts Pressure on Party Lines." The subhead read, "A roundtable jab turns into a legislative lesson." One paragraph in particular went viral. Leavitt may have won the applause, but Crockett did the homework. Her bill doesn't just expose gaps in current housing legislation. It leaves very little room for spin. If last night was a fight, this morning, Jasmine Crockett walked out holding the blueprint. Meanwhile, Jasmine sat in the back seat of a black SUV, headed toward a local shelter in Woonsocket. The media buzz hadn't hit her directly yet. She hadn't turned on the TV, she hadn't read the articles, she didn't need to. Liana's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. She finally put it on airplane mode just to breathe. "Why aren't we saying anything?" she asked, glancing at Jasmine. "Because they're saying it for us." At the shelter, Jasmine met with volunteers and case managers. She took off her blazer and rolled up her sleeves. Someone handed her a clipboard. Another walked her through their intake process. Cameras arrived midway through her visit, but she didn't adjust. She was already in it, answering questions, reviewing forms, asking about funding delays. A reporter called out as she walked out of the building. "Congresswoman, is this visit part of a media strategy to push your new proposal?" She didn't stop, walking. "I've been coming here for 3 years," she said. "They just finally noticed." Her tone was matter-of-fact, not smug. Inside the press bus, someone whispered, "She's not reacting, she's just working." The headlines kept coming. The quiet counterpunch. MSNBC, Leavitt's missed swing. Crockett's heavy hit. Vox, how to win without shouting. NPR. What truly stunned political insiders wasn't just the content of Jasmine's bill, it was the timing. It made her look not just prepared, but almost prophetic. She hadn't waited for Karoline to attack. She'd already built the answer. By evening, 2 moderate Republicans and one independent senator had publicly said they were open to discussion on the Crockett proposal. It wasn't a sweeping endorsement, but it was a movement. And Karoline? She was booked for 3 more interviews, but now every producer had a copy of Jasmine's bill. Every segment started with, "Let's talk about the proposal that's got everyone buzzing today." Karoline stuck to her talking points, but each time it felt hollower, like arguing with someone who wasn't even in the room, because she didn't need to be. But while Karoline tried to spin the spotlight back toward her, Jasmine had already moved on, and the country was following her lead. Karoline knew how to handle a hit, or at least she thought she did. By the next morning, she'd been through makeup, mic check, and a full team briefing. Her first interview was on a conservative podcast with a loyal audience, Safe Ground. The host opened with, "Looks like the left's trying to make noise again. What's your response to Crockett's little housing memo?" Karoline smiled, right on cue. "It's a flashy document, sure. But let's not forget housing policy is complex. You can't just throw words on paper and pretend it's a plan." Except that's not what Jasmine had done, and Karoline knew it. Still, she leaned in. "I've actually looked at this so-called proposal. It's got emotion, I'll give her that. The math doesn't add up. What she didn't realize was that fact-checkers were already working on the numbers. By the time her second interview aired, Reuters had posted a breakdown, line by line, confirming the accuracy of Jasmine's projections. The article's headline was blunt. Crockett's proposal checks out. Leavitt's critique does not. Her phone buzzed. On set. Seth again. "You need to stop saying the math is wrong," he texted. "It's not. People are noticing." Karoline stared at the message. She hadn't expected it to spiral this fast. By late afternoon, she'd already been asked, twice if she planned, to propose an alternative. She dodged both times, deflecting with talking points about personal responsibility, wasteful spending, and government overreach. But something was shifting. The buzzwords weren't hitting like they used to. That evening, PBS NewsHour ran a 6-minute segment unpacking Jasmine's bill. It included real interviews, not politicians, just regular people, a bus driver in Baltimore, a teacher in Wichita, a grandmother in El Paso, taking care of 2 grandkids after their parents got evicted. One clip showed a woman in tears. "This bill," she said, "feels like somebody finally listened." The next morning, a political strategist, someone who'd worked on Karoline's media campaigns last cycle, appeared on Morning Joe. "I'll be honest," he said. "Jasmine Crockett played this masterfully. She didn't argue on stage. She didn't insult me. She let the work speak, and the work is airtight." Even Mika Brzezinski nodded. "We're not used to that in politics." Restraint with results. Karoline watched the segment in silence. She didn't speak, didn't touch her coffee, just sat there, arms crossed, jaw tight. Seth eventually broke the quiet. "We could still pivot, maybe focus on inflation or education." "No," Karoline said. "She ambushed us with this bill. We're not pivoting, we're pushing back, but it's not landing. Then make it land." Seth didn't respond. He just walked out of the room and texted a mutual friend who worked on the Hill. "She's spiraling, won't let it go, it's getting obvious." Meanwhile, Jasmine stayed out of the spotlight. She declined interview requests, skipped panels. Her team released only one statement. "We welcome all critiques, as long as they come with real alternatives. This isn't about who talks louder, it's about who does the work." The quote went viral. Even conservative strategist Dana Haynes retweeted it with the caption, "Hard to argue with that." But it wasn't just the media shifting, it was the public. Constituents began emailing Karoline's office in droves, not screaming, not threatening, just asking politely and persistently, "Have you read Jasmine Crockett's proposal? Do you support it? If not, what's your plan?" Some sent their own stories, others just asked for answers. Karoline issued a new statement that afternoon trying to sound firm. "We're reviewing all policy proposals and will continue to support smart, targeted solutions that help American families." It was vague. It said nothing. And for the first time, her base noticed. On Facebook, comments turned from supportive to skeptical. Even her allies on talk radio started asking, where's her counterplan? She had none. But while Karoline scrambled to reclaim her footing, Jasmine's silence was becoming louder than any microphone, and the nation was starting to listen. By midweek, the tone in Washington had changed. Jasmine Crockett was no longer being discussed. In the future tense, she wasn't someone to keep an eye on. She was the conversation. Her proposal had taken on a life of its own. Policy wonks were dissecting it. Grassroots groups were organizing around it. Congressional offices, ones that hadn't returned her calls before, were now scheduling meetings with her staff. Inside the Rayburn building, Jasmine sat quietly in a subcommittee hearing on affordable housing. The room was packed, not because of some headline-grabbing drama, but because people were finally interested in the details. Jasmine didn't stand up. She didn't call names or lean into theater. She just talked. In my district, she began, I've met veterans who served 20 years and came home to eviction notices. I've met single moms working 2 jobs who still can't qualify for assistance because the paperwork takes too long or gets stuck in a state-level backlog. This proposal isn't perfect, but it's a start. And if anyone in this room thinks we don't need a start, I'd invite you to meet the families I meet every week. There were no camera pans, no dramatic music cues, but the room was quiet. Respectfully quiet. Representative Alan Drake from Oregon, a moderate with a history of ducking bipartisan housing efforts, leaned into his mic after she finished. I read the whole proposal, every page, and I'll admit I didn't expect to be moved. But I was. It's a serious document, and it's long overdue. Jasmine didn't blink. She just nodded once. The exchange made its way to Twitter in seconds. Drake says he's moved by Crockett's bill. This is bigger than expected. Crockett didn't just respond. She redirected the whole conversation. Outside the building, people had gathered. Not in protest, just in support. Posters read, "Policy over performance and let the work speak." A few reporters stood along the sidewalk hoping for a quote. Jasmine didn't give them one. Instead, she walked straight into the crowd. People clapped. Some called her name. She stopped, talked, hugged a woman who whispered something in her ear, and immediately burst into tears. That moment, caught on a single phone camera, spread faster than anything her office could have planned. Not because it was performative, but because it wasn't. She didn't know someone was filming. She was just being present. Across the city, Karoline sat in a makeup chair getting ready for yet another segment. The tone had shifted even there. Her producer leaned in awkwardly. "They're going to ask you again about the bill." Karoline sighed. "I'm not going to endorse it." "Understood. But just be prepared. The angle's different today." "What angle?" "They want to know why Crockett's winning over Republicans." The word hung in the air like something toxic. Karoline didn't respond, just looked in the mirror, adjusting a single loose curl behind her ear. On air, the interview started like usual. The host smiled too wide. The lights were a bit too hot. "So, Congresswoman Leavitt, Crockett's bill has gained traction. Even Representative Drake called it moving. Do you still stand by your criticism?" Karoline's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I stand by facts," she said. "I think we need serious dialogue, not quick fix emotion." "But isn't that what she's offering? A serious document?" Well, look, anyone can write a report. That doesn't mean it's sound policy, but the moment had already passed. Back in the committee room, Jasmine remained seated while others filed out. Alan Drake approached her. "Some folks on my side might actually back this," he said quietly. "Won't say it publicly yet, but you've done something here." Jasmine didn't gloat. She said, "Then help me do more." He extended a hand. She shook it. No cameras, no press. Just a simple moment of quiet progress. But while others played the optics game, Jasmine was building momentum, and it was starting to leave Karoline in the dust. The leak wasn't planned by Jasmine's team, but it couldn't have come at a better time. It was Thursday evening when an anonymous source sent a short 47-second audio clip to 3 separate political journalists. No watermark, no context, just a muffled recording of Karoline Leavitt at a private fundraiser in Charleston, South Carolina 2 weeks earlier. In it, Karoline's voice was unmistakable. "You think they actually read these policies? Please. These people don't care about substance, they care about who makes them feel seen. Give them a slogan and a punchline, they eat it up." She laughed in the clip. Others did too. But it was the next line that lit the match. "I mean, these are folks who can't even fill out basic forms without help. And now we're pretending they understand Crockett's 10-point housing reform? Come on." By Friday morning, the clip had over 3 million views. Karoline's office didn't deny it. They couldn't. Instead, They called it taken out of context and blamed the political climate for distorting her words. But the damage had already spread. On CNN, anchors didn't hold back. She just insulted the very people she claims to represent, one said. That's not a political strategy. That's arrogance. Local radio stations across swing districts picked it up. Even some of Karoline's longtime supporters began pulling back, issuing vague statements about rethinking endorsements. Meanwhile, Jasmine, she didn't say a word. Reporters asked. Her team refused. The only thing they released was a simple quote from Jasmine at a community housing summit in Des Moines. I'd rather spend my time fixing problems than commenting on someone else's mistakes. That line got picked up by The Guardian, then the Associated Press, then USA Today. And in D.C., the silence worked like a mirror. The more Karoline spoke to control the fire, the more out of touch she seemed. The more Jasmine stayed quiet, the more people leaned in to hear what she might say next. In a private strategy meeting, Liana looked at Jasmine, almost in disbelief. You're not going to say anything? Not even a single tweet? Jasmine shook her head. She's already said enough. Liana, lean back, arms crossed. It's a smart move, but you're really okay letting her implode on her own? Jasmine looked up from her tablet. This isn't about her, she said. It's about what happens next. And what happened next hit faster than anyone predicted. That weekend, Jasmine's housing proposal passed its first vote in the House Subcommittee on Housing and Community Development with 6 yes votes, including 1 Republican and 1 independent. It didn't mean the bill was law yet, but it meant it was real, moving, alive. Karoline's name didn't appear once in the subcommittee notes. At a town hall in St. Paul, Jasmine stood before 200 people, parents, veterans, students, seniors. She wore no blazer, just a deep blue sweater, slacks, and a pair of old sneakers. The mic crackled before she spoke. I don't care who gets the credit, she said. I care that no veteran sleeps in their car next winter, that no mom works 2 jobs and still can't afford a 1-bedroom apartment, that no child fails a grade because their housing situation changed 5 times in 1 year. We have the money. We've always had the money. We just needed the will. Applause didn't erupt. It grew, quiet at first, then louder, steady, sustained. That same night, Karoline's fundraiser in Cincinnati was canceled last minute. No public reason given. Just an email from the host that read, "We're going to pause on this for now." On Monday, the Boston Globe ran a headline that summed it all up. Crockett builds while Leavitt burns. Karoline issued a public statement that afternoon, saying she was deeply misunderstood and committed to respectful dialogue. But no one was listening anymore. But while Karoline kept trying to rewrite the narrative, Jasmine had already moved forward, and the country was moving with her. The following Friday, the room at St. Mark's Community Center in Akron, Ohio, was smaller than any political event Jasmine had attended that month. No podium, no press. Just folding chairs, some donated baked goods, and a bunch of handwritten name tags peeling at the edges. And yet for Jasmine, this felt more important than any committee vote or news cycle. She walked in quietly, a canvas tote slung over her shoulder, still wearing the sneakers from her last town hall. Kids darted between the chairs. Someone played soft gospel from an old Bluetooth speaker near the juice table. Mrs. Dorsey, a retired school nurse in her 70s, walked up and took Jasmine's hands. You don't know what this means to us, she said, eyes watery but steady. I think I do, Jasmine replied, but I still want to hear you say it. They talked for 5 minutes. No rush, no handlers hovering, just 2 women, one who had fought all her life to get noticed, and another finally making sure she was. That was the real win. Not the subcommittee's approval, not the national praise, not even the quiet endorsement slipping her way from folks too nervous to go public just yet. It was this, that real people, not influencers, not consultants, were starting to believe again that someone was actually working for them. Back in DC, Karoline hadn't posted in 3 days. Her team was splintering. Seth had stopped returning texts. A senior advisor resigned without notice. And more than one donor had gone silent. The story had shifted. No longer Crockett versus Leavitt. It has become what leadership really looks like. And Jasmine never raised her voice to get there. She never dragged Karoline's name through the mud. Never clapped back online. Never booked flashy interviews or leaned into spectacle. She let the work build its own spotlight. Even behind the scenes, she was methodical. One night, Liana had asked her over dinner, "Did you ever think about going for the throat?" Jasmine hadn't hesitated. "Of course," she said. "But that's a cheap win. I'm not trying to win out loud. I'm trying to win right now." She paused, then added, "And more importantly, I'm trying to stay winning." It wasn't arrogance, it was clear. The country had watched a quiet masterclass in strategy, restraint, and timing, and most people didn't even realize it until the dust had already settled. When the full bill reached the House floor a month later, Jasmine spoke only once. Brief, unemotional, focused. This is for people who stopped asking for help a long time ago because they were tired of being ignored. Today we show them they were never invisible. The room applauded, not thunderously, not with fanfare, but respectfully, genuinely. And as the vote closed, 229 in favor, 204 against, the room didn't erupt. Instead, it settled into a kind of stillness that only follows something real, something earned. Outside, Jasmine's car waited, engine running. But before she stepped in, a reporter asked, "Do you feel like you finally got the last word?" Jasmine looked at her. There was never supposed to be a last word, just better ones. She got in, closed the door, and rode away. Because sometimes the loudest wins are the ones that don't need to be shouted. If you believe that real change comes from action, not noise, and that substance always outlasts spectacle, hit that subscribe button. There are more stories like this, and they deserve to be heard.